Noah is an 18-year-old male. He just graduated high school and is beginning to play college soccer. Noah is 5 foot 11 inches tall. He's 170 pounds. And then we estimate that he is about 15% body fat. Now, whenever I do pick up a new client, sometimes they are and sometimes they are not comfortable with sharing a progress photo. Some people, that's kind of their entire goal, is to improve their aesthetic progress and lose body fat and gain muscle. And so they're very comfortable with sharing a progress photo. For all of these people, we're going to assume that they did share one. And then body fat percentage does matter for your total daily energy expenditure. The higher lean mass you have for your body weight, the more calories that you burn. In episode 2, I talked about total daily energy expenditure calculators, online resources that you can use. Being able to input an accurate body fat percentage is really going to be a good tool for you. However, it's hard to get a good reading of your body fat percentage. I'm not going to recommend, unless they have that tool available to them and they'd like to, I'm not going to recommend somebody goes and gets like a DEXA scan, which is pretty much an x-ray of your body to figure out what your body percent is or your body fat percentage is. A lot of times it's really just going to be comparing you visually to what other people at confirmed body fat percentages look like. But again, in this hypothetical, let's just say that Noah is 15% body fat, which I think is pretty normal. It's not super, super lean, but he probably has good visibility of his muscles, maybe has some ab separations as well, which I think for an 18-year-old soccer player is pretty normal and pretty good, pretty healthy. His goal is simply to perform better at soccer, but he wants to make sure that he doesn't lose any muscle. So again, he's not trying to necessarily bulk up and get much bigger. He's not trying to cut down and get much skinnier. He just wants to perform better at soccer. And then like a lot of teenage boys, he wants to make sure that he keeps up his muscle. His current routine is that he lifts 3 times a week and runs 3 times a week in the morning. And then he has soccer practice in the afternoons 5 days per week. He is motivated to reach his goals by his love for the sport. He just doesn't know much about healthy eating. He has played soccer since middle school. He has access to a standard commercial gym where he does his weightlifting, and then he spends about an hour on each weightlifting workout. Again, these are things that are going to more so come up in part 2 of this series. But they also affect his nutrition. He does not have any injuries that he's sensitive to, and he lives only a few minutes away from his gym. That's actually going to be the case that I wrote for all 4 of our athletes today, is that they live only a few minutes from their gym, just to simplify things. For many other people, if you live 15, 20 minutes away from your gym, it's more of a sacrifice to get there. I'd love to see if maybe we can spend a little longer there each day that we go, but then not go every single day, depending on your preferences. Noah does not have any metabolic illnesses, and he spends about $50 to $60 on groceries each week. He eats usually 3 meals in a day and a snack. He does not usually eat out, similarly to me. He does use protein powders, but not every day. He only uses it after the 3 days a week that he lifts weights at the gym. He does not have any allergies to foods, but he dislikes fish, he dislikes Brussels sprouts, and he dislikes peas. He is also not following any special dietary patterns. Noah tells me that he is willing to change whatever he needs to be a better soccer player. He's very committed, has a lot of energy for this, which is great. It's something I always love. He does really enjoy pizza, and he would love to keep pizza in his diet. He is used to getting most of his protein from things like eggs, milk, ground beef, and chicken. His favorite vegetables are broccoli, carrots, and tomatoes. And his favorite fruits are apples, bananas, pineapple, and watermelon. Of course, at 18 years old, he does not drink alcohol. Then, Noah sends me an example day of eating. For breakfast, he had 4 eggs. With the eggs, he had cheddar cheese, and he put butter on 2 slices of toast, and he had a glass of 2% milk. For lunch, he had a ham and cheese sandwich with lettuce and tomato. He had a string cheese. He had a granola bar. He had a banana, and he had a bag of Doritos. For a snack, he had a Rice Krispie treat, he had a Dr. Pepper, and he had an Uncrustable. For dinner, and perhaps at 18, maybe we should say that he goes home to his mom's house for dinner. Not that it really matters. For dinner, he had pasta, meatballs, Parmesan cheese, garlic bread, carrots, and a Mountain Dew. And then for dessert, he had 8 Oreos. Now, it seems like a pretty reasonable diet, especially for someone, of his age and his activity level. But when we go and we break it down, using a total daily energy expenditure calculator, of course, at his, activity level, it's kind of going to depend on the day, whether he has practice, whether he goes on a run, whether he lifts weights. But it looks like his total daily energy expenditure is going to be about 3,100 to 3,400 because he is very, very active running around playing soccer. When I tracked his day of eating, his breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner, and dessert that I've just read to you, that was 4,050 calories. It was about 150 grams of protein. It was 475 grams of carbs and 80 grams of fat. Now, it was a lot of food, and when you're eating so much food, it is pretty simple to meet all of your micronutrient targets, all of your vitamins and minerals. And Noah did hit all of his targets, except for his diet was deficient in vitamin C. Fortunately, I would say that vitamin C is probably one of the easiest vitamins or minerals, for that matter, to improve in your diet. You can just get it from citrus. It's very, very low calorie to improve that. But looking at his diet, it is several hundred calories, perhaps even up to 1,000 calories above his maintenance, his energy expenditure. Now, again, depending on the day, maybe he's not eating that much every single day, but you will see that commonly. He's eating some very, processed, very palatable foods like Doritos and Rice Krispie treats. It sounds like he's having full sugar soda, which, of course, liquid calories are not something that I recommend outside of, you need them quickly in the middle of a long game in the form of something like a Gatorade. But so the main goals that I have for him, of course, I want him to eat enough vitamin C. But then I actually want to cut back on his calories by 700 to 800. And I want to keep his carbohydrates high. His protein was pretty good, but I want to keep it where it's at while limiting our calories. And then again, we are going to be limiting calories. I want to make sure that his micronutrient intake remains the same and remains proper, even though we're going to be restricting his calories. So, as I've said, it's pretty simple, actually, and pretty straightforward, especially for a diet like this, to just make some relatively small changes to his diet and let the overall structure of his day, the habits that he has in place, to remain about the same. So looking at his diet, what I would want to do is actually keep his breakfast almost identical. He's having 4 eggs with cheddar cheese, butter on 2 slices of toast, and a glass of 2% milk. That's a pretty good diet. Has some protein, has some pretty healthy fats in there. Of course, saturated fat is not considered the healthiest fat, but I mean, he's a very active kid, so he's getting fat from good sources, eggs and butter and milk. And then he's having a good amount of carbs as well that are going to help fuel him throughout his day. The only change that I'm going to make to his breakfast is that I would like for the toast that he has with his eggs to be whole wheat toast. Now, I might not know exactly what type of bread somebody eats, depending on what they send me in this email. That's a question that I would definitely want to ask them in our Zoom call. But let's say that he was eating white bread toast. I would want him to change it to whole wheat toast for a little bit of extra fiber, as well as the phytochemicals that come from that whole grain. And then I'd like for him to change his glass of milk from his 2% to either skim or 1%. Now, I know that there is many people out there do not like skim milk at all. It's milky water and it's gross, and I understand, especially if you're used to whole milk, you're not going to like skim milk. I unironically enjoy skim milk. It's probably my favorite sort of milk. Of course, I'm partial to the fact that it has more protein for less calories, but really, genuinely, I do not mind the taste of skim milk at all. I could drink nothing but skim milk for the rest of my life and enjoy it. I know that that might not be the case for him, so we might struggle with that. In that case, perhaps some 1% milk. And that's just in the interest of saving a little bit of calories while keeping his breakfast the same. So again, for breakfast, the only things I've changed was I've added whole grains into his toast, and then I have changed the milk fat percentage of his milk. Next up for his lunch, again, before he was having a ham and cheese sandwich with lettuce and tomato, he was having a granola bar, a string cheese, banana, and Doritos. So it's a pretty big lunch. He's a pretty snacky guy. Maybe he doesn't eat it all at one time. Maybe he has the sandwich and the granola bar, and the rest he just kind of keeps in his bag and eats throughout the day. However that is, lunch, I would actually like to change a decent amount of it. I don't want to change the overall structure, but for example, when you're just having like a ham and cheese sandwich, there's going to be very, very little protein coming from that lunch meat. Most ham and cheese sandwiches, really a slice, 2-3 of ham, and that's not going to be doing very much for your protein goal. So what I'd like for him to do is change it to a chicken sandwich. Just cook up some chicken breast, maybe slice it into long strips, and then when you're making your sandwich, you're going to use the chicken. He can keep using the mayo. I want him to put a little bit more lettuce on his sandwich than he probably did before, but then the fact that he has tomato on there is great for volume and eating the vegetables in that regard. For the sort of snacks that accompany his sandwich with his lunch, I would like him to completely eliminate the Doritos. I'm not saying that you can't have a healthy diet and still eat Doritos, but in his case, I would like the Doritos to go away. And then what I want to do is he can have the granola bar and he can have the banana with his lunch, but then I'm just going to take that string cheese that he used to be eating with his lunch, and I just want to put it later in the day with a snack. Going on to his snack, before he had a Rice Krispie treat and an Uncrustable and a full sugar Dr. Pepper. Now, a change that I'm going to make into pretty much every single athlete or person that I will ever work with is exchanging your full sugar soda with the diet soda alternative. No, aspartame does not cause cancer. That is a topic that I plan on going into later in a future episode of this podcast. A podcast all about food additives and artificial sweeteners and things like that, and the data that we have that proves that they do not cause those adverse health outcomes. I feel no amount of caution as I recommend that somebody switches from full sugar to diet sodas. Now, some people really don't like the taste of diet sodas. To that I say, you will get used to it. I promise you will. Some people are pretty pessimistic about the outlook of their taste buds adapting to the diet soda alternatives, but you will get used to it. And if you don't think you will, I promise. I actually know people who have said, I've tried to switch to diet soda and I just can't do it. It tastes so bad. I gag whenever I taste, the zero sugar alternative to my full sugar soda. I just love my full sugar soda. But then I'll see that same exact person drinking an artificially sweetened like energy drink or something, and they love it. They think it tastes great. And I'm like, well, there's obviously a disconnect, because it's not that you hate the taste of the artificial sweeteners. It's that you're not used to the taste of a full sugar alternative of that energy drink. Many energy drinks like Ghost energy drinks or things like that don't have full sugar alternatives, but people will still like the taste. It just kind of goes to show me that you can adapt to the taste of diet soda, and really I think it's a great tool. I think of all the diet alternatives of foods, low-fat version of cheese and all these different things, diet soda comes very, very close, especially when you get used to it, and it is a tool that I'd recommend that everybody uses. Anyways, if he doesn't want to have a diet soda, that's fine, but he's not going to have the full sugar soda. He's just going to have water, and then if he wants, he can have a diet soda. But for his snack, rather than having the Rice Krispie treat and the Uncrustable and the full sugar soda, he is either going to pick that he's going to have the Rice Krispie treat or the Uncrustable. Then he's going to have his string cheese that he used to be eating for his lunch. And again, if he wants, he can have a diet soda. For his dinner, again, I want to add in whole grains. Whole grains really are good for you. I recommend them to everybody for the fiber and for the beneficial phytochemicals that come from the bran and the germ of the grain that a lot of us don't get when we eat refined grains. So I'd like him to have a whole grain pasta. And then rather than the meatballs, especially if you're getting like a pre-made store-bought meatball, they're usually very, very high in fat and pretty low in protein. So rather than having meatballs with his spaghetti, I want him to have just ground beef instead. A 90-10 would work great, and most people, plenty enjoy the taste of a 90-10 ground beef. If you wanted to go further, you could do a 93-7 ground beef, but some people at that point think that it's way too dry and they can't do it. Again, ground beef is one of those things you kind of just got to get used to it. It's not as bad as, some people make it out to be when you get into the leaner cuts. If you get to super, super lean, like 96.4, I do understand that at that point it can be very different mouthfeel and taste and everything. Then it's definitely something like an 80-20. But when you go down to like a 90-10, you're saving a lot of calories, you're getting a good amount of protein, and it should taste pretty much the same, especially because most people drain the grease off their ground beef anyway. And then, of course, he's having his pasta with tomato sauce and Parmesan cheese. He can keep that. He was having, let me check. Yes, he was having carrots with his dinner before, and that's something that we're going to keep. It's a great source of your vitamin A, or rather, it's a great source of beta-carotene. And a beta-carotene is actually, basically, it's two vitamin A molecules that are connected together in the middle, and then all our body has to do is break one bond, and with that bond broken, you have some vitamin A. So carrots and sweet potatoes are sources of those beta-carotenes, which can be converted into vitamin A. And really, you do need only a pretty small portion of carrots to get the majority of your vitamin A needs satisfied for the day. And then again, with his dinner, he was having a Mountain Dew. If he wants, he can have a diet Mountain Dew. If not, he can just have water. Then for his dessert before bed that he sent to me before, he was having 8 Oreos. Now, of course, I'm sure that was just sort of a snack, a mindless thing that he didn't think about. I don't know if that's a habit he has every day. But what I did go ahead and do is fit into his diet a little bit of a dessert. What I'm going to have instead of 8 Oreos is 6 Oreo Thins. And I'd like him to have 2 little clementine oranges, cuties, to satisfy his vitamin C needs. One thing that is really beneficial for athletes in regards to vitamin C is that vitamin C increases the absorption of calcium and iron in your digestive tract. And both of those are minerals that are very, very important for athletes for, hemoglobin production so that you can transport oxygen well in your body with iron, and then for the health of your bones for calcium. And in fact, if you eat calcium and iron, if you take a calcium and iron supplement together at the same time, they will actually kind of interfere and compete for the transporters that will move them from the inside of the small intestine into the bloodstream. And so it can actually be harmful to have a meal that is high in iron and high in calcium at the same time. But one thing that will help with those transport mechanisms is the consumption of vitamin C. So I think it might be good for him to have those cuties near and around dinner so that he can help absorb a lot of that iron that he's getting from that ground beef. Now, again, before he was having more than 4,000 calories in a day, 150 grams of protein, 475 grams of carbs, and 80 grams of fats, and was deficient in vitamin C. With this new diet that I've written for him, he is now consuming 3,250 calories. He is consuming 200 grams of protein, which for him at 170 pounds is probably even too high. He doesn't even need that much protein. So, again, if I was coaching him and he wanted, to go back to some of those snacks, I could actually probably cut out a portion of his protein and replace it with something like a Rice Krispie treat that we know he enjoys. And then the calories would remain the same, his protein would remain adequate, and then he would enjoy his diet a little better. His diet has 315 grams of carbs now, 132 grams of fats, and is not deficient in any of the micronutrients.